Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When a century-old Kentucky farm becomes the target of a power-hungry HOA chairwoman, Jonathan John Brooks faces an unexpected battle. Armed with his loyal dog, Ranger, and an unyielding sense of justice, John must protect his family's legacy against mounting threats, lies, and a scheme to destroy everything he holds dear. Jonathan John Brooks had always been proud of his family's legacy. His farm, nestled in the rolling green hills of Kentucky, was more than just land. It was history. Passed down through 4 generations, the 20-acre estate was a vibrant piece of rural Americana. The farmhouse, with its whitewashed walls and creaking wraparound porch, stood as a testament to over a century of hard work and resilience. It was here that John had grown up, and it was here that he intended to remain, surrounded by the serenity of open fields, the hum of cicadas, and the comforting presence of his loyal dog, Ranger. Life on the farm was simple, yet fulfilling. John grew vegetables in the expansive garden, tended to his herd of rescue horses, and took pride in his rows of grapevines, which he hoped to one day turn into a modest vineyard. Though the nearby town had grown in recent years, sprawling into the countryside with suburban developments, John's farm remained a steadfast holdout, untouched by the cookie-cutter McMansions that now lined the adjacent hills. However, change came knocking, quite literally. 6 months earlier, a new neighborhood had sprung up on the Johnson family's former farmland next door. Dubbed Silver Hills, the development boasted luxury homes, neatly trimmed lawns, and a notoriously strict homeowners association, an HOA. At first, John had barely paid attention to the construction noise and the sudden influx of SUVs. He wasn't part of their suburban world, and he intended to keep it that way. Then came the letters. One by one, envelopes from the Silver Hills HOA began to arrive in John's mailbox. Each letter was the same, an invitation, though it felt more like a demand to join their association. The letters promised improved property values and a more harmonious community aesthetic, a thinly veiled jab at the rustic charm of John's farm. At first, John ignored them. His neighbors, other small farmers in the area, did the same. Their independence was sacred, and none of them wanted to surrender their freedom to an HOA. But the letters didn't stop. Each one became more insistent, urging John to reconsider and threatening to escalate the matter. He began to sense an undercurrent of hostility in their words, a determination to bring his land under their control. Things escalated further one breezy morning when a sleek white Range Rover pulled up to John's gravel driveway. Out stepped a woman who radiated authority and entitlement in equal measure. Dressed in designer shoes and clutching a leather-bound planner, she introduced herself as Karen Winslow, the chairwoman of the Silver Hills HOA. Ranger, ever protective, growled low in his throat, his hackles rising. Karen shot a disapproving glance at the dog before turning her sharp gaze to John. "Mr. Brooks," she began in a tone that brooked no argument, "we need to discuss your property and its impact on our community." As John leaned against his porch railing, arms crossed, Karen launched into a rehearsed speech about property values and community standards. She pointed to his weathered white house, his wooden fences, and his vegetable garden as concerns that needed to be addressed. Her demands were laughable. Replace the fences with aluminum, remove the garden entirely, and repaint the house in one of their approved neutral tones. She even suggested relocating his horses, claiming they were disruptive to the suburban aesthetic. John listened in stunned silence before cutting her off. "Ma'am, this farm isn't part of your HOA. It's been in my family for over 100 years, and it's staying exactly the way it is." Karen's nostrils flared. "We'll see about that," she snapped, before turning on her heel and marching back to her car. As the Range Rover sped away, kicking up gravel, Ranger barked at its retreating form, a sound that echoed John's own frustration. Karen Winslow's visit left a sour taste in John's mouth, but he tried to brush it off. He had dealt with pushy people before, and he figured that would be the end of it. However, Karen was not one to back down. Just 2 days later, an official-looking letter arrived in John's mailbox. The envelope bore the Silver Hills HOA logo, and its contents were even more audacious than Karen's earlier demands. The letter detailed a list of violations on John's property: the unpainted fences, the vegetable garden visible from public roads, and the presence of livestock, which they claimed was a nuisance. Most infuriatingly, it concluded with a demand that John allow the HOA to inspect his property within the week to ensure compliance with their regulations. John was livid. He knew that his farm was entirely outside the HOA's jurisdiction and had the deeds to prove it. Ignoring the letter, he instead reached out to his attorney, Liana Rivers, a sharp, no-nonsense professional who had handled his family's legal matters for years. Liana reassured John that the HOA had no legal authority over his property. She sent them a cease and desist letter, warning them that any further harassment would result in legal action. John thought this would put the matter to rest, but he underestimated Karen's determination. Days later, while he was running errands in town, Karen struck again. She arrived at the farm with 2 other HOA board members in tow, clipboards in hand and cameras slung over their shoulders. They ignored the private property signs and marched straight onto the land, snapping photos of the house, the garden, and even the barn. Their blatant trespassing was caught on John's security cameras. Worse, they attempted to open the barn doors, breaking a latch in the process, and took pictures of the horses as if building a case against their presence. As Karen posed dramatically near the garden beds for one of her colleagues to photograph, she didn't notice the sharp growl echoing from the shadows. Ranger had been watching them the entire time. The loyal dog barked furiously, sprinting across the yard toward the trespassers. Karen screamed, dropping her clipboard as Ranger lunged, his growls echoing through the air. The board members scattered in all directions, one of them barely making it over the fence before Ranger nipped at his heel. Karen and the others fled to their car, leaving behind scattered papers and a deep silence that felt like justice. When John returned home later that afternoon, he noticed a small crowd gathered near his driveway. To his shock, Karen was standing at the forefront, loudly declaring to the assembled neighbors that his vicious dog had attacked an innocent HOA representative. She brandished a bandaged foot as proof, claiming that Ranger had escaped the property to bite one of her team members. The murmurs of concern among the crowd made John's blood boil. Without saying a word, he calmly ushered Ranger back inside, his mind already racing. Later that evening, he reviewed the security footage from his cameras. The recordings were crystal clear. Karen and her team had trespassed, damaged his barn, and provoked Ranger. Armed with evidence, John prepared for the next battle. He wasn't about to let Karen's lies go unanswered. John knew that Karen's smear campaign was far from over. The crowd outside his driveway, stirred up by her accusations, had begun to whisper. Words like dangerous and irresponsible floated through the air, but John wasn't one to let lies stand. That evening, after thoroughly reviewing the footage from his security cameras, he formulated a plan. The next morning, John invited his neighbors to gather at his property, offering transparency in the face of Karen's claims. Many were curious, unsure whom to believe, while a few die-hard supporters of Karen eyed John with suspicion. Karen herself arrived, wearing a smug expression and holding a stack of papers that she claimed were legal complaints filed against John and Ranger. "Let's get this over with," Karen said, her tone dripping with condescension. "I have more important matters to attend to than defending this community from a reckless dog owner." Unbothered, John hooked up his laptop to a portable projector and began playing the security footage. The crowd watched as Karen and her team blatantly ignored the no trespassing signs, stepped onto John's property, and photographed every corner of his land. Gasps erupted when the footage showed them breaking the latch on the barn and peering inside. The final blow came when they saw Karen pose near the vegetable garden, completely unbothered by the barking of Ranger, until the dog charged to defend his territory. The video clearly captured Ranger staying within the property boundaries, proving he hadn't attacked anyone unprovoked or left the premises. The moment when one of Karen's team members tripped and fell during their hasty retreat drew a mixture of stifled laughter and shaking heads. Karen turned crimson, her confidence visibly shaken. "This doesn't prove anything," she blustered. "Your dog is still a threat." John's voice cut through the growing murmurs of the crowd. "The only threat here is you and your team breaking into my property, damaging my barn, and spreading lies about my dog." He then pulled out copies of the footage, neatly compiled for the police. "And now you'll be held accountable." As if on cue, the sheriff's patrol car pulled up to the driveway. Deputy Michaels, a no-nonsense officer well acquainted with John, stepped out. "Mr. Brooks, you called." "I did," John said, handing over the evidence. "I'm reporting criminal trespassing, property damage, and false allegations against me and my dog." Karen tried to interject, waving her stack of papers. "This man is endangering the entire community. That animal—" "Save it for court," Deputy Michaels interrupted firmly. He reviewed the footage with a skeptical frown before turning to Karen. "Ma'am, this evidence directly contradicts your claims. You and your team had no right to enter Mr. Brooks' property." Karen's face contorted in indignation. "This is ridiculous. I'm the HOA chairwoman. I was protecting property values." Deputy Michaels shook his head. "That doesn't give you the right to break the law. You're under arrest for trespassing and property damage." As he cuffed her, Karen's protests grew louder, but the crowd seemed to have made up their minds. Her supporters stepped back, some muttering apologies to John. As Karen was escorted to the patrol car, one of her board members, still nursing the bite on his leg, attempted to slink away. John stopped him with a pointed look. "You can explain to the sheriff how you got that bite while trespassing." The man stammered, but had no defense. Deputy Michaels added him to the growing case against the HOA. But the revelations didn't stop there. Upon inspecting the damage to the barn, John discovered that one of the team members had knocked over a piece of his farming equipment, breaking an expensive hydraulic pump. The total repair costs now exceeded $15,000. With Liana's help, John prepared to include these damages in the case. As the sheriff's car drove away, the remaining neighbors approached John. Many apologized for doubting him, while others thanked him for standing his ground. The mood shifted. The crowd that had initially come to condemn him now saw him as a victim of Karen's overreach. That evening, as John stood on his porch, Ranger lying contentedly at his feet, he felt the first sense of relief since the ordeal began. Karen had underestimated him, and now she would face the consequences of her hubris. Karen's arrest was only the beginning of the legal battle that lay ahead. The evidence John presented, security footage, property deeds, and damage estimates formed an airtight case. Liana Rivers, his trusted attorney, moved swiftly, filing charges for trespassing, defamation, and property damage against Karen and the Silver Hills HOA. The case gained traction quickly, with court dates set for both criminal and civil proceedings. In the days following her arrest, Karen became uncharacteristically quiet, no doubt strategizing with her lawyers. But her silence was short-lived. By the end of the week, anonymous flyers began circulating in the neighborhood, accusing John of being a dangerous neighbor and painting his farm as a safety hazard due to his vicious dog and unregulated activities. The flyers were riddled with misinformation, claiming John's farm lowered property values and alleging violations of county codes. John's neighbors, however, were growing wise to Karen's tactics. Several of them came forward, sharing their own experiences with her overreach. One resident revealed that Karen had fined them for planting flowers without HOA approval, even though they lived on a property excluded from the HOA. Another neighbor recounted Karen's attempts to coerce them into selling their land for community expansion. Despite the growing support for John, Karen was not finished. Late one night, under the cover of darkness, a group of vandals broke onto John's property. They tore down sections of his fence, spray-painted insults on his barn, and overturned several vegetable beds. One of the cameras captured a glimpse of Karen's unmistakable white Range Rover parked just outside the property line during the attack. John reported the incident to the sheriff's office immediately, adding vandalism to the growing list of charges against Karen and her accomplices. The damage was extensive, costing thousands in repairs and lost crops. But Karen's biggest mistake was leaving a trail. One of the vandals had dropped a phone during the chaos, which the police quickly traced back to a Silver Hills HOA board member. The discovery led to a further escalation in the case. The vandal's phone contained text messages linking the attack to Karen, who had orchestrated the entire incident in an effort to intimidate John into backing down. Instead, the evidence only strengthened his resolve. The community began to rally around John. Farmers and neighbors alike offered their help to restore the damaged property, while some residents of Silver Hills started questioning Karen's leadership. A petition circulated, demanding her immediate resignation from the HOA. As the case headed toward trial, Karen's allies grew fewer, and her desperation more apparent. John, meanwhile, stood firm. He refused to be intimidated and vowed to see justice served, not just for himself, but for everyone Karen had wronged in her relentless pursuit of control. The court ruling came as a seismic shift for both John and the entire Silver Hills community. The evidence against Karen was overwhelming. The judge not only upheld John's claims, but also condemned Karen's behavior as blatantly abusive and unlawful. She was found guilty of trespassing, defamation, and orchestrating vandalism, resulting in an order for her to pay $25,000 in damages to John alongside the $15,000 for property repairs. Additionally, the Silver Hills HOA was fined $50,000 for its complicity, which included Karen using association resources to fund her smear campaign. Karen was sentenced to 11 months in county jail, a ruling that shocked many in the neighborhood, but served as a powerful message about the consequences of overstepping legal boundaries. As news of the case spread, the local media turned it into a cautionary tale, with headlines like "HOA Tyrant Meets Justice" and "Farmer Stands Tall Against Suburban Bullying." But the most significant change came from within the community. Many Silver Hills residents, embarrassed by Karen's actions, began reaching out to John with apologies and offers of support. A group of neighbors volunteered to repair the damage to his property, helping him rebuild the destroyed sections of his fence, replant his vegetable beds, and repaint the barn. Some even brought over seedlings and tools, eager to assist in restoring the farm to its former glory. The HOA itself underwent a massive transformation. Karen's resignation was swift and non-negotiable, leaving a leadership vacuum that residents were determined to fill responsibly. A new HOA board was elected, led by Marcus Ellison, a level-headed lawyer who promised to focus on fostering cooperation rather than enforcing arbitrary rules. Marcus reached out to John personally, apologizing on behalf of the HOA and offering to cover any future costs incurred from Karen's mismanagement. The positive ripple effects of the ordeal were felt beyond Silver Hills. With Karen's departure, the antagonism between the HOA and neighboring farmers dissolved. John's farm, once a target of hostility, became a symbol of resilience and community pride. The new HOA even proposed a partnership with the farmers, organizing events like farmers markets and festivals that bridge the gap between suburban residents and their rural neighbors. John's reputation soared. What had started as an unjust battle turned into a shining example of standing firm against injustice. His farm became more than a place of work. It was now a gathering point for the community. Locals flocked to his newly revived vegetable garden, eager to buy fresh produce. Families visited to see his rescue horses, and children delighted in meeting Ranger, who had become something of a local hero. For John, the most profound change wasn't the newfound fame or the strengthened fences. It was the sense of unity that had blossomed from conflict. As he stood on his porch one sunny afternoon, watching neighbors and friends share laughs during a community picnic, he realized his family's farm was no longer just his legacy. It was a testament to the power of standing firm, building bridges, and transforming adversity into something better. Ranger, sitting faithfully at his side, barked cheerfully as children ran to pet him. John scratched his ears and smiled, grateful that the storm had passed, and left his home stronger than ever. Months after the court case ended and Karen was taken into custody, life on John's farm had settled into a peaceful rhythm again. But the impact of the ordeal lingered in unexpected and meaningful ways. Sitting on his porch one cool autumn evening, with Ranger lying contentedly at his feet, John reflected on how the conflict had reshaped not only his life, but the entire community. The farm had never been busier. Neighbors, once distant and indifferent, now stopped by regularly to chat, purchase fresh produce, or admire the rescue horses. Children from Silver Hills loved visiting the farm, often bringing their parents to meet the hero dog, Ranger, who had become something of a mascot for resilience. A group of local volunteers even helped John install educational signs around the property, explaining the history of the farm and the role it played in preserving the area's rural heritage. One day, Marcus Ellison, the new HOA president, approached John with an unexpected offer. "We've been talking," Marcus began, "and we'd like to make amends in a lasting way. The HOA wants to create a preservation zone around your farm, a formal acknowledgement of its importance to the community." John raised an eyebrow. Preservation zone. "What's the catch?" "No catch," Marcus assured him. "It would protect your land from future encroachments." The HOA would also help fund projects to restore and maintain the historical structures on the property. Think of it as a goodwill gesture and a way to remind everyone what we almost lost. After careful consideration, John agreed. The collaboration marked a new chapter for Silver Hills, one that emphasized mutual respect and cooperation instead of division. But not everyone found peace. Karen's downfall had been swift and public, leaving her reputation in shambles. After serving her sentence, she quietly moved out of town, reportedly to a gated community in another state. No one seemed to miss her, and the neighborhood's collective sigh of relief was palpable. Still, her actions served as a cautionary tale, a reminder that unchecked power and entitlement could lead to ruin. For John, the experience was transformative in ways he hadn't anticipated. Sometimes he mused to Ranger one evening. Standing your ground isn't just about protecting your land. It's about showing people that fairness and decency still matter. The farm, which had once felt isolated, now felt like the heart of a growing, supportive community. The farmers' markets hosted on his property became a monthly highlight, bringing together suburban families and rural neighbors in a way John had never thought possible. Even the local paper ran a feature titled "The Farm That Saved a Neighborhood," crediting John with fostering unity in a place once marred by tension. The greatest satisfaction, however, came not from public recognition, but from the quiet moments. Watching the sunset over the rolling hills of his family's land, hearing the soft clucking of chickens or the rhythmic chewing of horses in the pasture, John felt a profound sense of fulfillment. His farm was more than a patch of earth. It was a living, breathing legacy, one that stood firm in the face of adversity. One afternoon, as John was mending a fence along the property line, a young family from Silver Hills stopped by with a basket of baked goods. The father shook John's hand, thanking him for setting an example for the community. "You didn't just fight for your farm," he said. "You fought for all of us." As they left, their children giggling and waving goodbye, John couldn't help but smile. His fight had been worth it, not just to protect his home, but to inspire others to stand up for what was right. On the next 4th of July, John hosted his first community barbecue. The fields were filled with families spreading picnic blankets, children chasing each other, and the smell of grilled vegetables wafting through the air. Marcus raised a toast, thanking John for being the soul of the neighborhood. As everyone cheered, John looked around and felt something he hadn't in years: genuine connection. In the end, John realized the battle with Karen wasn't just about winning a fight. It was about rediscovering what it meant to be part of a community, one built not on power or rules, but on respect, resilience, and shared humanity. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, John leaned back in his chair, a contented smile on his face. The farm had survived, stronger and more cherished than ever, and so had he.